everybody. Hope everybody is having a lovely summer. I recently did a live broadcast on the importance of the karmic implications in a horoscope. And I kind of wanted to continue on a little bit with that discussion, but if you look in the bottom of this video, I'll put a link to that video so you can watch a little bit of it and get a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. And please don't mind the bells in the background, local church bell ringing practice. It kind of happens occasionally here in the UK. But going a little more deeply into the subject, because when I did that video, I got a comment from somebody that was asking about whether or not all the planets have a karmic effect in the chart. And of course, all the planets do have their own individual karmic effect. But I wanted to point out a little more deeply just how important Rahu and Ketu are in terms of defining the karmic implications in a chart. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, I'll give you a little bit of background on Ketu and Rahu. I don't want to make this a long video though, so I'm probably just going to keep it brief. Aside from the karmic implications in a chart, Ketu is going to deal with what we feel most familiar with. I like using the explanation of the fact that in terms of the royal court of planets, Ketu and Rahu are the army. Ketu translated literally means flag. So what do we do with the flag? We mark that territory that we're already very familiar with, right, as being our territory. We know the lay of the land. We know where every hill is. We know every single aspect of it. And, you know, in terms of building up our castle walls around it, we know where to put the moat and everything like that. But eventually, if you just stay behind those castle walls, you're going to feel like your life is getting really dull, right? And you feel like you need to explore more, right? So Rahu represents the side of the army that goes out and explores new territory. So that can be more encompassed into the kingdom, so to speak. So Ketu represents what we're most familiar with, what we've done already in previous lifetimes, what we have a strong foundation with. But the problem with Ketu is it relates to a strong foundation that is somewhat incomplete and is in need of further development. And that's Rahu's job, right? So basically, what ends up happening through Rahu is all of that stuff that is underdeveloped, all of those aspects or sides of ourselves that are in need of further growth, well, they get kind of acted out on the stage of our life so that we have to go through a process of working through those particular things, okay? Many times in those circumstances, when that happens, we try to fall back on Ketu, what we've known already, what we've been through in many different lifetimes, and what we are most familiar with in terms of dealing with circumstances as they arise. But the circumstances that arise through Rahu are new circumstances, and circumstances through which we are being asked to grow and encompass more. If you watch the previous video, you'll get an idea of how some of this energy plays itself out, because I talk a little bit more in depth in that video, and I'm not going to go that into depth with it. But just to give you an idea of how much happens through both Ketu and Rahu, I want to use this particular chart, which is a chart of Bob Dylan. And I want to bring up the chart of planetary aspects. Now, when I'm talking planetary aspects in this case, I'm not just talking the full, what are called the full drishti aspects, such as Jupiter aspecting the 5th from it, and the 9th from itself, and the 7th from itself. There are other aspects, and they're judged in terms of a score from 0 to 60, what are called rupas, right? So planets are, you know, generally forming aspects most of the time. And if you look at this chart, you can see that it will either be Rahu or Ketu, or sometimes a little bit of both, that is receiving an aspect from almost every single planet. And, you know, in this particular instance, we're talking about Rahu receiving a lot of aspects. And so what we can see is that that Rahu Dasha is going to be a very busy time in the individual's life. So especially, let's just talk for instance, let's give it for instance. So this is Bob Dylan's chart, and Jupiter was his third lord. And for musicians, the third is an important house. We're talking house cusps, not equal houses here. And that's a little bit different. I'm not going to go too deeply into that. So basically, during Rahu Jupiter, Dylan would have found a lot of purpose through his creative expression. He would have taken on a completely different shape in terms of how he was expressing himself and how he was putting his purpose forward. And between 1964 and 1966, that's when Dylan began to do more of his electric work in terms of his music. So he was redefining his purpose and putting himself across in a completely different manner. And he was completely evolving and completely changing, expanding his career, getting to the heart of what he himself wanted to do with his work and not just be defined as a folk singer. And that happened because of this really strong aspect between Jupiter and Rahu. Because Rahu would have been channeling that energy of Jupiter, which is the first and the third lord, and it's also the Atmakaraka, which is important when it comes down to career. It would have focused that through the nodal axis, through Rahu. Rahu's conjunct the ninth here. That's about purpose, what an individual believes in. Because it's in Virgo, they're going to put a lot of hard work and effort into their purpose. Into what they really believe in. And that definitely happened during Dylan's life between 1964 and 1966. So the point I'm wanting to make here is obviously every planet has its own agenda in the chart, but the nodes are going to move that energy along a particular line in order to grow an individual's life in a specific type of manner, in alignment with the karma that they had inculcated in a previous lifetime, in which they're needing to resolve in this particular lifetime. So I was talking in my previous video about really the karmic implications in the chart are really the most important thing. And you'll find almost everything that an individual who goes to an astrologer for, on one level or another, it's going to boil down to that nodal axis, to the karmic implications in the chart. The reason they're asking those questions will always come back down to that. So it's a very important thing to deal with in a chart. And I just wanted to put forward a quick video just to give you an explanation and to expand further upon my previous video, which was touching on the importance of this, but also wanting to touch on the importance of aspects to Rahu and Ketu. And maybe soon I'll do a video showing a few more examples of this, but I just wanted to get this information out there to help everybody to further understand just how important Rahu and Ketu are. So Ketu, when there are planetary aspects to Ketu, it's going to take all of those aspects and it's going to, on many levels, help the individual to understand that previous way that they were reacting in association with that planet. But it's also going to do, like Rahu, the thing where it's going to focus that energy along the path of the where it's connected with the nodal axis. So with Ketu's particular experience in this chart, I haven't looked at Dylan's Ketu Dasha, so I don't really know if he's even had Ketu Dasha. Let's see. We'll just take a brief look. No, that would be 2030 when he goes through Ketu Dasha. But there might have been some shorter periods. But basically what will happen with Ketu is it will do similar things, only in a Ketu manner. And Ketu represents what we've done before, what we're most comfortable with. But quite often in Ketu Dashas, it feels like things are moving fast, but not really going anywhere. Right? Because you're not developing, you're going back over old ground, having to look at things again and go very deeply into things, and things are changing and you're feeling a pull in a different direction, but not really feeling like you have that comfort to really, or that security to step outside of your comfort zone. And so the planets that are aspecting Ketu, such as in this instance, we've got Mars aspecting Ketu. So we can see that during Ketu Mars, it could make it so that Dylan begins to express himself in a manner that, even though he feels it's his duty and purpose to do so, that he attracts a little bit of conflict to himself, because that's something that happens with Ketu Mars alignments. But I'm not wanting to get into chart interpretation too deeply. I'm just more wanting to show you how important the interactions between the planets and the nodal axis are too, and how important that nodal axis is in terms of defining a chart. Because I find I get people who come to me, they want to know when they're going to get married, they want to know when they're going to find a job, when their income is going to improve. And really what you do is you notice how all those questions on one level or another are tied into the nodal axis, as it would be, because that's the individual's karma. That's what they're having to learn. That's going to explain why they're having a hard time getting married, why they're having a hard time sorting out their financial life, why they're having a hard time getting a job, and underneath it all, why they're having a hard time being happy, which is why they're in touch with the astrologer in the first place. So in my Tier 1 and Tier 2 consultations, I do a complete analysis of the karmic implications of the chart. And I do that before anything else, before any of the other questions in the that the individual has sent me, because it makes understanding the answers to those questions a lot easier. So if you would like to book one of those consultations with me, there should be a link at the bottom of the page. That's going to do it. Thanks a lot for watching, and talk to you soon. Bye now.